Welcome to CMOs Off Script, where the conversations are as bold as our coffee and the insights as sharp as our wit. We're your hosts, Amanda, Bethany, Julia, Laura, and Nisha, 5 women with diverse perspectives on navigating the intricate world of healthcare marketing. Had enough of the same old marketing babble? Us too. We'll dive into one topic each week and serve up our unfiltered advice. Get ready for a fresh take on marketing. Welcome to CMOs Off Script. I am so excited to be hitting on this topic today. Let's dig into account-based marketing. I know it's been smattered into various other episodes, and I think there's a lot more that we can do to dig in on this topic. As we look at this landscape today, everyone is really busy and very hard to reach. I've had numerous conversations with executives around how do we actually cut through the noise and reach our customers? How do we reach our buyers? How do we improve I like to talk about improving the signal versus noise ratio. And I think there's a real opportunity for us here today to start to dig in around how we can use account-based marketing. What does that really mean? And how can we use it? What are some of the tools that are available today? How has that evolved? We were just off script talking about how that's changed over the last 5 years. New tools are emerging each and every day to support us in this work. And what are the things that we're looking at? Where are the opportunities? So story time. Let's dig in. Does anyone have a compelling story of how they've leveraged ABM within their organization and driven any really impactful outcomes? Using amazing tools or not? And if not, I am happy to go and tell a little story.
Yeah, I'll start here. So I think, one of the things that, and this is a non-tool story, this is just about culture, is account-based marketing. The word marketing at the end of it makes it seem like it is just marketing's function to lead the effort. Mm-hmm. And what I think, in my previous organization, one of the things that we just, from a culture shift perspective, tried to innate was that it wasn't just marketing's role, it was sales and marketing. And so a few people use, account-based experience, right? Creating that experience for everybody. And so that, I think, is just starting from there, starting from that framework of, hey, it's not just marketing's role, it's everybody has to be in it, including your customer success, client success people, right? That was really helpful.
I love that. I hadn't heard that before, Nisha. That's cool. And I think that's a great mind shift. And I do think, like you mentioned, Amanda, that this jumps back to prior calls or prior recordings we've had. Totally. It's that sales alignment piece. It's sales and marketing alignment. It's the thing that brings them together. And I love that about account-based marketing. So my story time is working with a client that was really wanted to go deep on the urgent care space. And so we worked together, the marketing team that was working with this client, we worked together with the sales team actively. And it was absolutely fantastic because we were able to craft content, email content, advertising content, landing page content, and in an entire sequence using shout out HubSpot.
She's not just a shill, I promise.
I'm not. I'm just telling facts. It was the tool we were using, but we used it to really go deep on the value proposition for the urgent care space, but working with this rep who had so much experience in the space that it was just fantastic. And so it was really like that idea of bringing the two together. He could specifically, he came back through and was able to give really good perspective on what each account was, their experience was, what they were dealing with. And so our messaging was just completely custom. And we ended up having, great results out of that program. And that was the program that got me to really wrap my brain around and go and become such a fan of account-based marketing. So there you go. There's my story.
Love that.
And that was really before AI.
Well,
What's our story?
I think that's interesting, right? Because we know account-based marketing is really just excellent personalization, great marketing programming, recognizing the client need at a deep level, and pursuing that. And I have a theory on why it became called account-based marketing. Unofficial theory is that when you look at account-based sales, which it is as well, right? To your point, Nisha, it's account-based experiences. It's definitely unified, working on the same specific list of accounts, same specific strategies and tactics from different lenses. When you look at the financials, a sales team basically has headcount as their budget and commission. There isn't often software embedded. It's software spent in IT. It's software that is in marketing. And I have a theory that the reason that it was labeled account-based marketing is because marketers had budget for software and sales had no budget for software. Now, I'm sure that somebody listening has researched that, but that's my theory, because around the time of the dawn of ABM, there was a ton of marketing content, articles, and coverage about why CIOs and CMOs are often the leading budget holders for software. It was all over. And I remember, this is now 6-7 years ago, my CIO and I were like, hey, they keep talking about how CIOs and CMOs are overlapping. They're, competing for software budget. Isn't that funny? And it became a common theme, but I actually now think that was early fodder for ABM, marketing at the earliest awareness stage. So I credit people like John Miller and at Demandbase and a few others who were probably dreaming that up.
That's really funny. That's very smart of somebody to do then. I always just thought it was because marketing was increasingly being required to deliver ROI. And so it's really the peak of that, Yeah.
Well, I appreciated, Nisha, your comment about the marketing sales collaboration here on this, but I am at an organization, or have been, that has, it's not all account-based. We were going from a lead-based system and having to transition the full tech stack to an account-based model within Salesforce, within HubSpot, across the tech stack, so that we could actually target specific accounts. And it started with sales, and then marketing as well had to think about how we were going to reach various accounts, because you could be cross-selling, upselling, etc. But when you start with a small organization that may have one product in market, they may not be thinking right away about all these different buyers, and they're not thinking about their sales process as an account led situation. Sometimes it's lead based. So first we had to do a transformation to go into an account based experience. Wow. And so that's phase one. And then moved into, okay, let's think about defining the different ICPs that we're targeting, and how do we create lists of those top organizations that we would approach from an account-based marketing, either at scale or one-to-one. And so that was, a whole process that had to happen across, all the channels, alignment across all aspects of the organization. And then one of the things we did to find success was work with an industry sort of an industry organization. They started consulting about these big health systems and helping organizations who are vendors better understand the layout of executives. So who's on the team, who has buying authority, who's new, let's talk about this. And so these were consulting projects we were able to buy, basically, to better understand an organization. So one of the criteria we used for our account-based, one-to-one kind of surround program was, do they have an affiliation with this industry organization, so that we could get the right level of intel? Because obviously our sales team had relationships and intel and stuff like that, but we really, account-based, the one-to-one, the amount of time, bandwidth, budget that you're spending on maybe one account can be really high in some cases. And so you want to give yourself the best chance of success to close that deal if you're, or to nurture that deal, move that deal forward if you're going to invest in that space.
So I have 50 questions that I would love to just dig in off of, that this is spurring for me. I'm going to just choose one. So one question is, how many of you are thinking about this as an either or, right? Are you doing only account-based marketing versus only lead gen, or are you trying to like balance the load a little bit, and or balance the risk associated with an ABM strategy versus a lead gen, demand gen style strategy? Talk to me about that.
I mean, I can jump in on this one. I think it's both. It has to be, but I'm sure organizations do have to make the choice. Like maybe you start with this lead-based, one message, one size fits all, and then you get more refined over time, because it's just, it's aligned with the maturity of your organization and probably your marketing and sales function within that. So I think most organizations start with general demand gen, move up into more performance, product level marketing, and then you move into scaled ABM or one-to-one ABM from there. But because each level you go up, or each level more personalized, it's more bandwidth. Now we can talk about how AI potentially makes that more efficient or can help you scale your team, but it's a high bandwidth kind of work that you have to do to make ABM at the one-to-one level work really well.
I just want to underline that, because I think that's so important, because I don't know that everyone understands the amount of time, effort, and energy that's required for that level of intensity and focus on a one-to-one account model.
Yeah, it's really different reporting too. Like if you're used to always measuring a certain way, and maybe your company culture is to always measuring a certain way, and then you say, okay, we're going to do this completely differently. I mean, a stepwise transition is going to be necessary. Unless you are so early.
I agree with you guys. I also think that there's about your company fit. So if like in the health tech space, if you know that your target audience are academic medical centers, that's a limited audience. That's a small market. And so you really have to be in account-based marketing at that point. There's not really an alternative. So I think it depends on what it is your company is selling, and then what's the market fit for it, and can you be a blended model. I also think there's an opportunity to refine to ABM, which I think, Bethany, you're describing. And I think there's this, we named it in our own company ABM Light, because it's going and it's using signal-based selling to find the people who are in market. And then that's your ABM right there. Those are the people that you need to be starting to create custom marketing properties and messages. So I think that's that blended model in my mind.
Yeah.
What do you
check out the blog post?
Yeah, and I think your comment, Laura plus Bethany, your earlier mention of ICP reminded me of something several years ago. We knew academic medical centers were a fit for a variety of reasons. We also knew that whether academic or just large health system, if they had a certain installation of Epic over a certain time, over the time had worn off, and they were ready to consider point solutions, not the all-in-one. Another good signal was if the leadership committee included chief nursing informatics officers or chief medical informatics officers, because they often had an understanding of why clinical plus IT was so valuable. And so there were a few different ways you could look at the ICP, but when you narrowed it down with all that criteria, there was an addressable market that we knew we could pursue. So that's not precisely ABM. After that, you're executing in a certain way that's personalized or more tailored, but it was a good example of how, when we knew our ICP, we could be more effective.
Totally.
Well, one of the things that I think is really important here, right, is that there's now, I mean, it's interesting because I think there is a level of thought and careful attention to detail that you're putting into assessing what some of those criteria are. But I think there's so much that's coming out right now around AI tools to help you with intent, and starting to look at, predictive analytics to really see where those opportunities lie. I mean, are any of you looking at tools to help you with this? I mean, some of this stuff I'm not sure you're going to get. I mean, certainly being able to leverage the industry association is amazing, but how are you looking at or evaluating potential tools to support this work around predictive analytics, intent, that sort of thing?
This is an area that's super interesting to me because I know the change of third-party cookies is on the horizon, and it'll affect a lot that's out there. So I'd love to hear your comments on it.
Yeah, I'd say that, it's like a tool or a company that you love to hate. ZoomInfo feels like it's taken over the market. And I think it's one of those things that I used to joke around with people. I'm like, do not head to their website until you're ready to make a purchase decision, because they will stop. I used to tell people, I'm like, I feel like they're going to show up to my son's school if I don't sign this contract right now. And so, they're great at what they do. And so for an ABM program, I think having that level of detail of contact information, especially, again, this is after all of the steps you all already said, right? Knowing your target persona, knowing the segment, and so when you get to that level of being able to dig into the actual or the account, and then down to the contact base, I think ZoomInfo kind of leads the market there still.
They are known for the best contact information. And what's interesting about ZoomInfo, or really any software purchase we're going to make, I have this conversation with my marketers or our SDR team, where a lead comes in and it's a junior staffer at a company that we're interested in, but it's someone that's not going to be a buying decision leader. I know when I'm looking at software, just like you said, Nisha, they're going to show up everywhere you go. I don't go to the website. I can't fill out that I'm the CMO and access, content or read information, because I know they're going to be all over me. It's way too strong a buying signal. So I actually ask other members of the project team at the lowest level possible so I can have them research for me. Because
yes.
I'm always like, guys, do not dismiss the analyst at X, because they're probably doing it someone's direction, and they're going to scoop up all the information, including what to ask when you're going to RFP, right? They're going to look at all the content, and it's going to send you the strongest buying signal. So please remember, if it's at the account and they're junior, it's still a good lead.
And influencers in the decision, like, just recognize the whole team. I so many times have had this conversation. So I love that you said that, Julia.
I think that's totally right. And that's why you would look at an account and develop relationships across the account, and not just one person or two people or whatever titles, right? So I think that's exactly right. And that leads to kind of what we track when we're setting up more of an account-based program versus general demand gen. And you're tracking how many relationships do you have at this company? How deep are those relationships? What levels of interaction have you had? How many touch points? What did they find interesting? Like, all of those things are aspects that you're tracking versus demand gen, which could just be like, straight, how much content did they engage with, or who, it's a different level of tracking, I would say.
And how are you rolling that then back up and reporting that back out, right? I think a lot of times, you can look at an account, in Salesforce, but how are you measuring and tracking that? What does that look like for you?
So if we're doing one-to-one, for a one-to-one program, we have to limit the number of accounts that we're actually doing at any given time. And for us, it was 5 that we had, 5 per person or per pod. So we set up a sales and a marketing and an SDR pod that would work 5 accounts. And so that means the sales folks would be aligned with the account relationship. The SDRs would be helping on the outreach and research side of the house. And then marketing was developing campaign messages and doing the execution across landing pages and content generation and gifting strategy and whatever else we decided to do, email outreach, stuff like that. So we were tracking, level of penetration in these accounts, how many eyeballs we were getting, or any level of engagement. Were they RSVPing to our event? Did they respond to the gift that we sent? Like, all kinds of things. So it was actually custom in some ways per account that we were working on. So when you're scaling, you find the right metrics for whatever you're trying to do with a bigger group potentially. But we were looking at like one-to-one, how deep are we getting, even levels of information, levels, new relationship introductions, like all of those things were elements that we would look at and report up. But because we were only concentrating on 5 accounts at a time, it was relatively easy to report that in a sort of succinct way.
Which is different than, say, if you're doing ABM, you're trying to do more one-to-many ABM at scale, right?
So HubSpot has an ABM dashboard. So you can use HubSpot to identify your accounts and then have that kind of comprehensive cross-module data. So that's one of the tools that we use, and it's a great way to have that visibility on all the activity. How deep is it going? Who's visiting a website? Who's opening emails? Who's engaging with somebody? And just a little asterisk shout out that I think is worth saying is ABM also is highly dependent on a content strategy. You have to have a really robust content thought leadership strategy in order to do ABM, because you need to have all of those assets and all of that information to provide to your audience. So that was just a little shout out for me. Sorry, stepping back.
No, that's actually huge as well. Laura, you just come in with these little gem comments, but I think that's really huge because a lot of times, and we didn't fully define this necessarily at the onset of the episode, but CEOs may not really understand what they're asking for when they're saying like, let's do ABM. They might just be thinking, I want this account and I want our marketing program to support like us talking to this account, and sales and marketing need to be aligned to do that. Maybe they got that level of things, but I think first you have to really define what everybody means by ABM, whether that's like a light model or some one-to-one, like, and the level of work that needs to or is required to do this well. And to your point about content, I think like I've been in several conversations with CEOs where I actually map out like, this is what it means. This is how I define it. Are we thinking about it in the same way? And if so, here's the level of content. Here's the level of alignment we need across the org. Here's the budget that we probably need. And this is for one account. So is the LTV for this account, or is that worth it? And here's the ROI we would run on this. And so we can't do this full scale 8 people focused on one account unless you're talking multi-million-dollar LTV or deal size. And so I think the way you do your ABM program has to have an ROI that is right for your average deal size or your LTV.
So good. Yes. Preach.
Can we circle, highlight, underline that? I think that is so important, right? Because there is a level of intensity that's required if you're going to be doing this type of approach. And it's not cheap. It's not resource. It requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of time, and potentially people, right? So that's costly. And that model has got to be the right size fit for your organization and the deal. Yeah.
100%.
So ABM content, let's talk content specifically. I think there's a lot of opportunity around personalization using AI. I know we've had on and offline conversations about how you can use AI to personalize. How are you or are you thinking about using AI to personalize your content, whether that's landing pages, emails, whatever, even just to tailor personas, right? Talk to me about that. I've heard some awesome stuff offline, so I want to get it on here.
I'm going to full disclosure. We're in the process of implementing, but several partners of ours work with Apollo, and Apollo is similar to a Zoom Info in terms of having a database, a B2B database. But it's an email sequences. It's tying into LinkedIn for engagement. It's using AI. So it's basically creating this engagement approach to try and find the people who are in your target market who are responding, who are creating buying signals. So that are, and that's really what you're looking for, right? So it's floating those people up. So it's a version, again, we like to call it ABM light, because it's doing the concept of personalization and engagement, but at scale. So it's not creating these distinct landing pages, which I've heard about that too. I think, Nisha, you were talking about that, but it's doing that communication at scale. So it's automating and using AI to engage, which I think is pretty interesting. And I've heard from partners of ours that are having a lot of success with that.
So here's where I think we need to talk a little bit about the cool tech that's happening in the background that even we as marketers who are fairly on top of it and highly savvy. So a couple times ago, we talked about qualified. I started getting Chili Piper in message in my mail. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm pretty sure that because we just talked about Apollo, I'm going to start seeing it as well as
everybody.
The super cool things that are happening in consumer tech that are driving AI and intent and targeting B2B. So it's out there. And Apollo, I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, I'll report out on it. I'll let you know how it goes. Stay tuned for further updates.
Well, and signal is very, very important, right? Because, and if you don't know why, it's because probably at any given time within your ICP, only about 5% are in the place where they're interested in making a buying decision. And so you're wasting a lot of time and resources potentially focusing on the 100% when you really need to narrow in on that 5%. Yeah. So how do you identify those buying signals? Again, at scale, and that's a bit of a mystery. And that's where some of these tools can really add a lot of value, and others aren't that great, frankly. But so is that where Apollo sits, Laura?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's interesting because I think looping back to the conversation about influencers, people who are not necessarily, the C-suite, but are influencing the decision. That's where tools like this can find those people. Who's out there looking? Who's pulling the data that for the CMO that we should be talking to. So I think that's where these tools can be really helpful, is finding the universe that's out looking for a solution and ready to engage in some capacity. But again, this is also going to need all that good content to then feed to that resource so that they have something to level up.
I think even ChatGPT and derivatives of ChatGPT, if it's 4 or whatever, are helpful in customizing content for different audiences, right? You can write a campaign messages for a CFO, for instance, and then ask GPT to customize those same messages for a chief marketing officer, an operations officer, or a CEO. I don't know how great that is yet, but it does kind of give you a directional version that you can use your team to edit versus create the first draft potentially. I mean, you're already creating the first draft for the CFO or for one persona, and then they can help you customize it based on, other things that you might be feeding it. So I think that's one way that you can find efficiencies through AI for an ABM program specifically.
Yeah, I've actually had some success with using GPT for building out a content strategy. But I think the thing that you have to understand about the series itself is being able to feed the engine the right set of information first before you're asking something of it, right? And so going back to, product marketing chops, that if you're talking about a buying committee, making sure that you've identified your buying committee, the specific characteristics of what that entails. Same thing with the market, feeding it market information, feeding it competitive information, feeding it your main differentiation points, right? So you're feeding the engine the right set of information from which they can pull from. And then you ask the question that you want, which is, hey, build me a nurture series for this type of persona at this length. And my CTAs are X, Y, and Z. And then it gives you a beautiful framework in which, yes, your team can utilize that and then be able to build off of it. But, most of my models that I have and I have like plural models because I have them based off of, but I think I've talked to you about them before, but most of them are because, and I use them over and over again because they're built, I've fed it enough information. Like you have to be able to give it valuable information about your company and about, what you specifically do in order for it to be valuable to you. So I think oftentimes people approach it as they're just like, hey, write me this thing. Well, the engine doesn't know anything about you. Yeah. And so you have to invest the time to get it, just like you would with onboarding a person, a real life person at your company. You have to feed it enough information for it to actually provide value back to you. So that's been really useful from a content perspective. And then Laura mentioned, I was talking about a company that I've run into that's, I think, only about 2 years old. It was actually started with a CMO. And she essentially built a company called Mutiny, I think is the name of it, Mutiny HQ, in which it uses AI you feed it again your various personas, and then it puts together landing pages and personalized messages just based off of the type of persona that you're attacking. And then you can build out specific tracks based off of that. And so you can take like a person who lands on that page, clicks on a certain link, you can take them through these various funnels and build it out and build that workflow out. So I've played around with the trial and it's really, really awesome.
It sounds really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, the proliferation of amazing tech is like nonstop. Yeah. And then it's just do I have the budget for that? Can I create the actual the business case for all of the tech that I need to be able to support something that ultimately is there to drive revenue, right? So, but that's the push and pull of marketing and our friends in finance.
Well, and do I have the time to implement all of these things too?
And the resources. Do you have the staff and the resources to actually make it happen, right? So it's there's a lot. I think we could go on. I've got about 10 more questions that I'd love to ask you all, but in the spirit of time, why don't we wrap and I think we've got probably the nascent ideas coming off of this for at least 4 more podcast episodes. Can anyone tell me let's share key takeaways, anything that anybody wants to make sure we take away from this conversation, because there was a lot of good stuff today.
I'm going to jump in. Nisha's Mutiny HQ, I think, is really interesting. I'm completely intrigued. That's a new one for me, so I want to go explore. That's awesome. And I also want to take Nisha and Julia's class on creating your best GPTs. So that your prompts are
So mine is evergreen. You have to be talking to peers and learn what else is out there. And I love this conversation. So this podcast might sound like it's for other people. It's actually for us. We love hearing what else is happening. And so, but replicate that. Go find people who are doing the same thing as you are, and build a community.
+1. Love that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say the account-based experience. Thank you for that. That was great, because I think making it all about us is actually not the point. It is really a wrapper. We just happen to be sitting in the driver's seat, but we need partnership with everybody.
Love that.
Nisha, sorry, go for it.
I think that was the perfect way to wrap up, Amanda. I mean, I don't know how to top that. So I think we should call it a show.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This was fun. I had a great time chatting, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
That's a wrap for this episode of CMOs Off Script. This podcast was made possible by Breezy Hill Marketing. Don't forget to explore the podcast notes or cmosoffscript.com for additional insights and resources. Until next time, be bold and stay curious.